Recently, we did a video on how much storage you should have in your desktop or laptop computer. But the brain trust here at TechWiki got back to work and quickly decided, hey, hold on a minute. People are on their phones a lot more than their computers these days. Why don't we do an episode about whether buying a high-capacity phone is worth it? And when I say high capacity, I mean it these days. It is easy to find phones with up to 512 gigabytes of onboard storage. That's as much as you would find in some laptops. And there are even a handful of 1 terabyte models on the horizon. But is there a practical use for such spacious phones? Or is everyone dropping fat stacks on them just wasting their money? Let's break down what actually eats up phone storage to begin with. Any phone you buy will obviously have an operating system installed that takes somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 15 gigabytes, depending on exactly how it's been tweaked by the manufacturer for your device. So after you knock that much off the listed capacity, another massive space hog on your phone can be games, just like on a desktop PC. Now, of course, you're not going to see mobile games that take up 50 gigabytes or more like you would on Steam, but the lower capacities of most smartphones mean that you do have to keep track of what you're installing. Quite a few of the more graphically intensive games out there can take up around 2 gigabytes of space each, and some of them can even take upwards of 5. However, most games usually take between a couple dozen and a couple hundred megabytes. So let's say you like your games and you've got a handful of the more elaborate titles and then a dozen or so of the lighter ones. You're probably looking at another 10 to 15 more gigabytes for gaming. The next storage glutton is video. To use an iPhone as an example, a standard 1080p video at 30 frames per second will take up around 130 megabytes of storage per minute, with 4K video at the same frame rate taking up about 3 times that much. So if you have a total of, let's say, an hour of video at both 1080 and 4K on your phone, you're probably looking at needing around another 20 gigabytes of space. The nice thing though is that both iPhones and Android devices come with a certain amount of free cloud storage, and of course, you can pay for more. Thing is though, it will take slightly longer to access files in the cloud as opposed to ones stored locally on your phone. And if you're on your mobile data connection and you've got a low bandwidth cap, it could end up costing you money to bring down videos that you want to show someone. Now with that said, we still do recommend that if you shoot lots of videos or photos, regardless of how much storage space is on your phone, that you do safely back them up either to the cloud or to another device in case your device gets lost or damaged. Now speaking of photos, many flagship caliber phones will use around 4 megabytes per photo on their default settings. So if you have about 500 photos stored on your phone, something that can happen pretty easily, you're going to need to add another 2 gigabytes. Again though, cloud storage will help offset this impact if you've got a quick shutter figure. But what about audio? Well, gone are the days where most of us are walking around with gigs upon gigs of songs in our pocket, because these days it's much more common to subscribe to a streaming service like Spotify and jam out that way. So we're going to assume that you don't need a ton of space for actual music, but with that said, you might want to reserve another gigabyte or 2, or another 10 or 20 if you're into downloading podcasts or audiobooks or video content from Netflix and consuming it when you're offline, like when you're on the plane. Bringing us finally to the variable with the greatest amount of variation, all your other apps. So if you've been keeping score at home, we've come in at anywhere from around 50 gigabytes of space to 70 to keep things comfortable for what we would consider to be a pretty heavy user. But how much you need beyond this heavily depends on how you use your phone. It's very easy for the average user with a couple dozen apps installed to need an additional 15 to 20 gigabytes, not only for the apps themselves, but in many cases to store all the extra data that they create and download. Think about all the photos that you take from within a social media app or all the pictures that people share with you in large group chats. So, with all that said, what's the answer to the original question? Well, we think that a user who uses their phone for lots of different things should be very comfortable with either a 64 gig or 120 gigabyte model, depending on their specific needs. So at this time, we wouldn't recommend spending money to go over that unless you've got some really esoteric use case where you know you're gonna go over that. Speaking of going over that, I've got to go over these notes from our sponsor. Pulseway is a real-time remote monitoring and management software that helps you fix problems on the go by sending commands from any mobile device. It's compatible with Windows, Mac, and Linux, and Pulseway's single app gives you remote desktop functionality so you can get access to real-time status, system resources, logged-in users, network performance, Windows updates, and more. With Pulseway, you can create and deploy custom scripts to automate your IT tasks. You can scan, install, and update all your systems on the go, and you don't have to take my word for it. You can try it for free at pulseway.com or at the link in the video description. So thanks for watching, guys. Like, dislike, check out our other videos, leave a comment with video suggestions if you want to see your ideas on Tech Quickie, and just don't forget to subscribe and follow so you don't miss it. We won't pay you for the idea, but you'll get the satisfaction of seeing your idea on the internet. Wow.